Boa tarde, bem-vindas, bem-vindos.
So welcome everyone, good afternoon. I am I'm Ricardo Guerra, and I'm with Mauricio sharing this panel. So the story of banking in Brazil, it goes beyond technology. Obviously, technology is associated to our story, but it goes beyond that. So, business was made, relationships with customers has evolved. And in customer relationships, we started back then with the ATMs using technology. Then there was the concept of the electronic bank, and the patients could access their bank accounts from anywhere. And then before that, we had internet banking. Before that, we had biobanking. And then more recently, in the last 10 years with AI, and now we talk about beyond banking, and definitely it doesn't stop there. So this is a journey that started more than 40 years ago, and we continue to move in it. So banking automation in Brazil has always been a global reference. We've had great challenges during this time. We remember hyperinflation, and in a way it helped us to finance investment in technology. Then we had the economic plans, these huge challenges, and you remember in exchange for the currencies, we had to do it the following Monday, right, when the banks were open. So we had challenges where we didn't have any more resources, like IPv4, more recently CNPJ, that was alphanumerical. That's the tax identity number here in Brazil, and this sector still grows a lot. And beyond the challenge itself, it allowed us to look at human resources and have a team of developers made, people who know about technology in a bank, and we have a world-class team. And maybe that was the greatest benefit that we had in this process with the market reservation and in terms of automation in the banking sector. So today we are summarizing these decades, and I'm part of this. I've been in this market for 45 years, and my colleagues who are here, they're going to comment on the different cases that portray the challenges, the victories, and everything that has happened in the last 40 to 45 years. So welcome everyone to the panel, and over to you, Guerra. Thank you, Mauricio. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you. It's a pleasure to be with these great names in banking technology. So I'd like to call up on stage, first of all, Alexandre de Barros, member of the Digital Transformation Committee and Auditing in Itaú Unibanco. Hélio Bocha, who is a business development from Calindai.
Glória
Guimarães, the executive president of the BD30 More Association.
Gustavo
Roxo, the founding partner of 39A Ventures.
And Valkyria
Schirmaster, executive president of MCIO Brazil. Thank you.
Bom, pessoal.
Okay, so first of all, thank you very much for joining us. We were colleagues, and we have been colleagues for decades. So if there's an advantage, is that we all know each other, and we've been through the same stories together. So we have a lot of different stories and testimonials, very varied, and I hope that you can tell this audience the most interesting stories in our journey. And I'm going to start the first round asking all of you about the unforgettable moment in your activity in banking automation and what you thought was the milestone that is really emphasized when you look back at all these decades. So I'm going to start with you, Valkyria. Let's go. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. And over here, my colleagues from the trenches. So we've been together for a few decades in the banks. So Mauricio, unforgettable moments, it's every day in IT, right? And you have to choose one of them. But the story I'd like to bring to share with you, and I think most of us work together on this, for me it's a milestone in the national financial market. And it was the implementation of SPB. So for the younger people, it happens in 2002. We're talking about more than 20 years ago, where they built a whole infrastructure, a banking infrastructure, the whole financial system exclusively in one bank. And it was the basis of what makes everything we do today in terms of innovation feasible in the banking sector. So PIX is one example. Without the infrastructure that was planned together with the central bank, this allowed us to evolve the financial systems, and if today we have these applications in real time in our mobile phones, it's because of this system. But, you know, life was not easy, right, Mauricio? You were already close to Yara and all the colleagues here, because until then, all of the processing, and we had the lot processing or batch processing, and we had a huge financial risk because, you know, there were distinct times for the processing, and maybe you couldn't do a settlement in a bank, and it was a domino effect that took everybody with it, and there was great financial instability in the country. But we have to remember that, you know, to go to a complete batch world, to the online world, you know, we need a lot of dedication and effort from everybody here. So we started by thinking about a connection network, a new one, absolutely exclusive for this because there was no safety. And especially in the technical areas, the people got mobilized. And inside the banks, it was a revolution. We had to create a reserve pilot online and do messaging systems. And half of the people have to choose a partner. The other chose another partner, and everybody had problems. Nothing worked well. So, you know, we had the handle trying to push the transactions from one side to the other, and central bank was monitoring to see if we were able to do the first tests. And I think this brought two great advantages, this movement did. The banks got mobilized and everybody built their own solution. And then, you know, in the future, they were all replaced. But the technical teams in the bank, everybody definitely participated and got their messaging systems. Otherwise, we would not have been able to advance in this volume that we operated at the time. The most important milestone for me, you know, I was beginning to get into executive positions at the bank. So we formed a team of system analysts from all the banks, and we went inside FEBRABAN. We specified systems and the test plans and specified the whole implementation plan, the whole deployment, and this only happened because there was huge collaboration of all the technicians in the banks. And there were technicians that were working as superintendents, there were technicians that were working as directors, some were working as CIOs, and they got together and they made things happen. So besides, you know, the problems we had with central bank, in our periodic visits, and everybody, oh, how are you? How are you? Oh, I'm fine. I'm great. Yeah. And then one day there was a meeting. Everybody was called on Avenida Paulista to talk about it. And, you know, how was your conversation? Well, it was not good. It was not good. Anyway, but the thing about making things happen, that was really something that was very interesting professionally and personally. And the movement that was led by SPB was maintained with the evolution of the financial system. Then there was the charging and PIX today, which is very successful, and the product has become more specialized, and it's about 100% of what we do in the banks today. But that's because of a group that worked a lot in 2002 and built this basis, which is very important for the system to grow. That's an incredible story. It's a system that, you know, it is the basis of banking here in Brazil. Gustavo, what was your moment? Well, I just wanted to make a comment about what Valkyria said. When we launched SPB back then, an interesting thing that happened was that we weren't really sure if it was going to work. We were only sure that nothing was going to work. And at some point in the meetings that you had, and everybody had to leave their cell phones outside, okay, let's put a minimum limit of 500,000. So, so you can't have transfers, right? Because if you have transfers, it's not going to work. So we arranged that. But I think it's, first of all, I'd like to thank you for the invitation, of course, but also thank Catarino and Keiji and Curti. If it weren't for them, we wouldn't be here because they actually tried to get this group together to hear stories and for us to bring a little bit of the history, because technology and innovation, you still have to learn about the past, our past, and that's where things evolved, and the merit is yours. Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation to be part of this. And I think this Congress, from the beginning, I'm going to try and be quick, but it is interesting because until today, talking about the financial market, I think 60% or 100% of this group knows what a KNAB code is. Do you know what a KNAB code is? But I'm not sure that there are 5 people who know what KNAB stands for. KNAB is the National Commission of Banking Automation. It was a team in FEBRABAN. Everybody was part of it at some point, and we sat there to solve problems. And, the messaging system, the first one, so bank slips only exist in Brazil, and everybody thinks it's great because a group like this at a certain point created the KNAB standard. And, this is the group that invented this idea. There are people who complain about it. And it was always very collaborative. And I was from a very small bank when they bought Real Bank. And then we went to Real Bank. It was a new world. There was a lot to do. And we didn't even know where to start. We had never seen a mainframe. I was introduced to the mainframe there. And a story that I want to tell, it's not even in the book, I think. At a certain point, Itaú made a mechanism, and everybody had a telecommunication network. The banks had telecommunication networks. And then, so they had invented the selling of the network. So who invented that? It was João Bezerra, who's over there. Okay, let me call that guy. Is he going to tell me something? And then he told me everything. So I said, oh, how great to work in this, because everybody is a friend, and they tell people stories. So it created this community environment that we have until today, which is great.
Great. I think that this thing about community is fantastic. We came to be friends throughout the decades. Gloria, I'm not telling them how long we've been working together, 200 years. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, FEBRABAN and Catarino, Keiji, and Kruger. Our book, No Code, is very successful. Read this book. It's very interesting, has many stories from people who were part of this past banking system, and you will like it a lot. But I would say that, Valkyria mentioned something really interesting, SPB. I think that all of us had great, very interesting experiences because we knew it wouldn't work. It didn't work. The central bank was always giving us a hard time. This happened to everyone. But there were other things that we had, for example, 24-hour teller, electronic settlement. But I think there was a key moment for us to start moving. Standardization. I'm talking about 1990s, the 1990s. And we mobilized to create some kind of standard, the KNAB that he mentioned. We got together to create some standards so that we could propose new things, new models. And in the 1990s, we came up with internet banking. It improved a lot the work at the agencies, at the branches. And it helped with the relationship with clients. There was a radical change in the sense. We learned how to use some technologies throughout these moments. We used differentiated protocols, XML standards. I think that was the first one. Actually, it came before SPB. It created the standardization, and it allowed us to be online in real time, because in the past we couldn't do this, like Valkyria mentioned. And there's something very important that I would like to highlight. This reunion, I mean, this working together with all banks, it has always existed. We would always help each other. Well, if we needed anything, we would call someone from Itaú, from Bradesco. And I think that this has come and stayed, this collaboration. So this was the beginning of improvement and standardization of our history. This was remarking. And I remember that we came here to FEBRABAN to present internet banking, and the director of some banks said, oh, you won't run the risk of having this working out. Well, you come here to introduce something and this person tells you they won't work. And nowadays we have pigs, we use our mobile phones, everything is being great. Thank you. Yes, great story. Internet banking shows our pioneerism in Brazil, the third country in the world to have internet banking. Elio, let's go back in time. Yes. Well, Febraban, Mauricio, thank you for having us, giving us this opportunity to be here together. I'm very happy. I think it's very special for me to be here at this Congress. 21 years ago, we had the first FEBRABAN conference here in this venue called Transamerica. Before, instead of FEBRABAN Tech, it was called SIAB, SIAB FEBRABAN. And SIAB was located in a small venue next to the Transamerica Theater. In 2001, Transamerica inaugurated this venue, and I had the pleasure of working with the team that implemented, that organized the first conference here. It was a fifth of what it is today, but it has changed the concept of exhibitions or events of technologies that we have in the country. And I think that nowadays it is the largest technology event in the country. I'm the oldest one in this group, and I think I'm part of the 10 oldest men here at this event. So I'll share a story about my life. It's an old story. I'll talk about the early 1990s. At that time, I worked at Unibanco. Unibanco carried out a marketing campaign that was fantastic. It was very successful. It brought Unibanco to another level. They created the Unibanco 30 hours, meaning that they would provide services at branches for 6 hours and 24 hours anywhere the client was. So this created demands for 24/7 banking systems. At that time, call center was very used by customers. I'm talking about a time before the real Plano Real. It was about 1994 maybe. So the bank started to have access to call centers, and when they created this 24-hour teller, it was very successful. And we also created home banking, one of the first processes of home banking in the country. It was a system carried out on PCs. Imagine what PCs looked like back then, or telecoms that we had back then. Those modems were huge. They were horrible, but it worked. And Unibanco did some great marketing on that. I think you remember that Bill Gates had this commercial of selling home banking to Unibanco. In this book, there's an entire chapter talking about this story, about how Unibanco was able to have a commercial with a TV commercial with Bill Gates. At that time, we had a lot of innovation. We created pager. Do you remember that? Well, all of this was about marketing. There was a world created by marketing professionals, but we, the IT team, we were behind that. So we had to change as we went. We had to evolve as we went, because the architecture didn't really work properly. It didn't allow many direct transactions related to balances and to amounts, and we had to work a lot. But the most interesting is that we saw satisfaction in those people working at those banks. They were working really hard, but they liked this idea of the bank being projected on the market, on creating a new paradigm on the market. People were really professionally satisfied or accomplished to see that. That's it. Thank you. Ellie, it's great to remember that this event has started over 20 years in this format, and you were part of that, right? In the past 10 years, all I do is just to continue your story, but you are one of the most important attendees of this event. It was great to be part of this. Nice. So, Alexandre, what about Itaú? What are the interesting stories that you have for us? Well, good afternoon. Thank you, FEBRABAN, Mauricio, Guerra, for the invitation. Thank you, Catarino, and all the no-code authors, co-authors, actually. I recommend this book to you.
Assim como os demais aqui, também faço.
Just my colleagues, I'm part of FEBRABAN Tech, that used to be called SIAB. I was part of the first commission in the first Congress back in the Transamerica Hotel. And it's funny how much it has evolved and grown.
Pouco mais para cá. Eu lembro quando eu estive aqui em 2000.
I remember when I was there in 2008, and we were talking about mobile banking. We brought our mobiles. We told people that the mobile was the future. I heard people saying, no, this won't work. Remember? We worked together already back then. But
Nos anos 2010,
talking about more recent times, 2010, 2012, in Itaú and the entire financial system, we had this legacy that made it harder for us to bring novelties to our customers. And we started asking ourselves if that was a model that was appropriate for those that are older here. Remember, the projects were, huge. There was this waterfall. It took us a long time to finish those projects, and we saw a lot of things happening abroad. PayPal, for example, it has changed the U.S. market very fast. Here in Brazil, We had e-commerce. Remember, when Submarino was founded, everything changed, and we started asking ourselves, are we doing the right thing? So I wanted to talk about this. I'm not talking about any specific technological disruptions, but about a cultural disruption. We started asking ourselves if it made sense to have a technological department where people would make orders. I mean, would order a project or a product. We would sit together for months to talk about that. We delivered the project. People didn't really like them, and this process didn't work. Guerra acted actively at that time, and we asked ourselves how we could change this. We visited more modern companies. We brought in the agile and we had to persuade people, persuade the executives of the bank, the board. We had to convince them, to persuade them that there was another way in which we work. We worked really hard on that. And then we started to have this, we came to this, combined team where we had professionals from different departments working together. In 2012, we had our first community, and it was great to see that. The board came to visit our community. The systems analyst was talking about products. The credit analyst was talking about the database, if it was the most appropriate to work on that. So with that, we showed our bank and people in general that we could work in a more integrated way. It's been 12, actually 13 years that we've been working like that. Everything changed. At Itaú, for example, we had 20 or 30,000 employees in back office, let's say, and nowadays we have this number of employees for technology. And we work in an integrated way. And I can say that this disruption has finally taken place, but we had to work a lot on that, include a lot of technology and debates in it to come to this point where we can say this has worked out. It's not an easy story. People may say, I work with the agile method, I have KPIs. No, we started from scratch. And I think that that moment was a very disruptive moment for the financial system and other companies. Everyone is transforming themselves. If you don't change, you'll be left behind. We can see that if companies are not acting different now, they'll be left behind. Anyway, we'll be talking a lot about AI, about data structuring, and if you do not open your eyes to these changes, you will be left behind. So I decided to talk about this fact that happened recently meaning 12 years ago. It's very interesting to hear from you because you show that the evolution of the financial system brings longevity for companies. There are bank representatives here that started working in the past, but their work is still very relevant. I think that the banking system was able to use technology to evolve and also to sustain, to make their business sustainable. So let's go to the next question. Gustavo, I'll start with you.
Apesar de parecer
What worked really well that back then seemed to be a huge challenge? I think that in technology, everything seems to be very difficult, very hard. But there was a time in 1990, I think, where we had the economic plans. I was not part of that time. And it's really interesting for those that work in this area to study what happened back then. Because during that time, somebody said, hey, the currency will change. Now we'll have less 3 zeros and the bank will have to be open. We didn't have, nobody's going home. And this thing will have to happen next Monday. And things really happened. I think that it has to do with human beings. When we have a problem ahead of us, we react. But I like to tell people about that time because then I show people that things need to be concluded. In my experience in the 2000s, we saw a lot of bank acquisitions. I had the opportunity to be part of 7 mergers, even Banco Real with Santander. And these are processes that when you start to think, no, this is not working, it will take too long, and you'll have many different deadlines, and then you just focus and go.
And this is an experience that creates connection with people for the rest of their lives. So people who, didn't sleep at night and, were awake on the whole weekend. So when I left the bank, my wife said, "Oh, nobody's going to call you anymore in the middle of the night," and so we remember the nights more than the days, right? And what actually worked for you, Gloria? What seemed to be an incredible challenge? But yeah, we're still there. We're still we actually like it, right? Working all through the night. Well, one day I went to correct something in a database, and I went to a party. I said, we're going to a party. Yeah, let's go to the party. It's going to finish at about 8 p.m. That's fine. So the worst thing happened. The next day I was still there at 10 in the morning and explaining to the agency what we had to do, what we couldn't do, and these stories really happen. But I think there are many things that mark us, but the fact that the Bank of Brazil was a public bank at the time, and it was able to compete and work with technologies with all the difficulties that we saw along the way. Because it was not easy for us to work with a project, have the board approve it, and you know that, right? And we worked a lot, and when they had to buy it, they bought the cheapest thing, and it was not always the best thing, right? And I was always fighting with the purchasing director. Aren't you buying it? You're buying toilet paper, and IT is for your whole life. You have to buy it. So it's an eternal fight we had. So this was a great challenge, and I think we learned a lot with this. We, at a certain point, had to evolve to the use of Linux and the databases and the languages as well, because we didn't have something else to use. I remember the time we said, so cut your leg and your arm, and we had to run, and we ran. Yeah, there was no other way. And that made us develop lots of new technologies, and it made us learn a lot too. So, the learning was very strong, and our technology team was really prepared, especially all those in technology. The banks were prepared for these challenges that we had all the time, and it was regulators, it was the business itself, and I think all of us were prepared for it. And this strengthened us. So I think this is something good, and it was good human capital as well. So we were able to educate ourselves well and exchange information, as we have been doing during all these years. That's it. Thank you. Great. Thank you, Gloria. That was great. Hélio? your experience. Tell us about it. What was the challenge that you were able to overcome? Well, I'm going to play around a little with Gustavo Roxo. KNAB, I was thinking about it, and it was one of the first jobs in terms of standardization. It was the standardization of the check. Every bank had a different check. And I remember that there was a Dutch bank that had a check that was this size. And KNAB, the beginning of FEBRABAN, did the first work of standardization of the check. So, wow. And I'm going to tell you a story. I said that I'm oldest, and so my things are older. So this is between 87, 88, more or less at that time. So at the time I was in banking technology. And FEBRABAN made a deal with Itaú Tech, and who worked with me was Cal, and today he is in the board of the bank. And we did the first TEF in the country, which is the electronic transfer of funds, so ETF in English. And we wanted to do a supermarket checkout, accept a debit card, and approve the purchasing at the time. So we structured this, and we checked how this would work, and how Itaú Tech would do this, what FEBRABAN would do this, what the authorizations would be for the banks. And the first big problem we found, and we were convincing ourselves that it was not going to work out, was to convince the supermarket. So we spent hours and hours with the president of Eldorado, the Eldorado supermarket on Rua Pamplona. Today it's a Carrefour, so before it used to be Eldorado. And we spent this time trying to convince the supermarket to do this. And finally, after a long time, this was years, we were able to do it, and we were able to put it in one checkout, this ETF transaction. So it's terrible. We were talking about 1988. Imagine telecom at the time. We're talking about Reimpaque. We're talking about X25, crazy things that we had back then. And it was terrible. So sometimes a transaction took 1 minute for approval because of the telecom, because of several things. And the great competitor for all this was the check, incredible as it may seem, because the customer didn't authorize it, so they got their checkbooks out and they paid with a check. And, the next time, they already used the check. So it was something that was not going to work, but it ended up working. So it was really slow, but there was a second checkout, a third one, and then they created the story that right? That any terminal, any checkout terminal from any company can make money transfer very quickly and in a very efficient manner. Thank you. That's it. Yeah, it's a standard in the market now. Yeah, incredible. Alexandre, be careful what you're going to say, please. What really worked very well, although it seemed to be impossible? Well, since I'm still at Itaú, I'm going to be quiet, right? Well, but anyway, let's talk about it. So we went through a lot. I'm not going to repeat what was already said. And just to talk about the importance of persevering and moving forward and using. So if I get the 80s, for example, more or less, we studied abroad and all that, and we started looking at personal computing, right? Personal computers, the famous PCs. And Brazil had a market reserve and had to produce its own personal computers here. But there was a bank, a traditional bank, that, it was complete command, total command. And for you to have command, complete command, especially when we're talking about technology and controlling the users, you have to have a technology that is more dependent and restricted. So that's what we did. So Bezerra and we went to talk to the board, and we told them that we wanted to put these personal computers and local networks for the users. So we were practically thrown out of the room, thrown out of the window of the 8th floor. They thought we were crazy, removing the mainframes, removing those terminals, completely stupid terminals, and have that in front of the user, and we would lose control, right? The user would have a spreadsheet by themselves. It was a whole system they would do by themselves. So then we went back to the subject. We went again. I can see the Vimy in front of us. At the time, it was the blue blood, right, at Itaú. And we persevered because we tried to take personal computing, not because we had Itautec at the time, it's because we really believed in it. So taking computers, departmental computers, that's what we called them, to the area, and the famous local networks, that was the paradigm of how to make apps at the bank. And first of all, we came out of the monopoly of the COBOL language. We went through several different languages, and I programmed several myself, VD, C++, and Guerra saw that a lot. So it's really something that seemed to be impossible in the beginning. And, maybe if I had given up on this project, maybe, that's something that is here until today. So, okay, we have a standard, okay, we have all of that, but we need to use it. We need to go beyond. We need to look at what's happening abroad, outside our door, what's happening out there. So things that we learned at this time, and it was hard. And then, we carried it out our whole lives. I see the financial market always doing this. The financial market is always bringing novelties. And, of course, we have our rules, the regulators, we adapt. But we have to go beyond. And I bring this story from back then. If you didn't go through this, it's something that is even difficult to understand. But in fact, we put computational power in the hands of our users. And what we called it the internal clients. I hated that name because it was not an internal customer. It was a partner, right? He worked with us. So it was something that we were sure was not going to work out. We were going to be dismissed, right, Bezerra? We left the room and then we were sure that we were going to be dismissed, and Friday they're going to call us on Friday afternoon and say, okay, that's it. But no, we continued, and it was very successful. I just wanted to add something. Today at 4 o'clock we have the autographs of the book, and you're going to be able to talk to the other authors as well, just doing some merchandising here. Sorry. Okay, great. And it's very interesting because this sort of thing created an engineering culture in the financial industry in Brazil, right? We don't have, we're not afraid of really looking at a technical problem in its roots and, solving competitiveness problems. And we see different banks being able to compete with any other bank from any other industry. Of course, it's not our competitive arena, but in terms of the technological platform, it's the same or even better because of the engineering culture. That's very interesting. What about you, Valkyria? So tell us about your experience. Besides Kinabi, that seemed to be what seemed to be an impossible challenge. I am a Scorpio, so for me it has to work out. So in my head, there was never the possibility of it not working out. The thing was, you had to be persistent to, really try and achieve the objective, and that's what guided my path in IT. But Alexandre talked a little bit about the issue of the bancões, the big banks. So we were one of the first companies to use technology in the beginning of the 60s, and this brought some pioneering activity, but in the 2000s, it became something heavy for us, a burden for us, because we developed verticalized systems. We only had the charging part, then we had the current accounts, and then the rest, and all of us were, after the because we worked a lot, and then they told us that nothing happened, right? When we were talking about in the Millennium Bug, right? When it was the year 2000, and then Bradesco decided to revisit its legacy systems. And Mauricio, who's here, he was on the other side of the force, right? He was a consultant. He came, he showed some nice designs, and people were talking about, service-oriented architecture. Nobody knew what that was. I didn't really understand it either, but I looked at it and I said, well, it looks like it makes sense. It does make sense, right? For you to, remove accounting from this system and make a single structure to control several areas and so on. Plus the issues of the systems that, used to work. And it was, it was reason and the will to do it, and very exciting as well, because we had the challenge of getting an application structure that was 40 years old that was working. Between us, it was working. But then we could see that it was not sustainable. And the story that it's not going to work out, and everybody said that it wouldn't work out, but I was sure that it was going to work out. So after that, we were able to bring in another 30 and then another 300 who thought it was going to work, and then more than 3,000 people were involved in this job. And then after 2, 3, or 4 years, the person on the other side of the forest had to come and help us, right, in this mission. And, I don't know why they didn't dismiss us 6 months later, because, there's people missing here, there's people missing here. But I think it was a huge challenge, and the challenge of the technology professionals, because they needed to not only understand, they needed to work according to the architecture. At the time, we talked about large functional components, but that, once again, it was the seed, it was the basis, and then there was the microservices and everything that we built after that. And we were able to allow the bank to adapt. And now the new architectures are going to be built, and there's the launching of Next and the mobile banking and this whole movement that is happening for in the movement to the cloud. So you can work on this with less components, and definitely would not have stood the test of time, and competitiveness wouldn't have stood the test of time without doing this. So the message is that sometimes we need to maybe be brave or, be responsible, but it's structuring movements that have to be made. Otherwise, this is not going to be sustained over time. And I think now we're living another moment, which is artificial intelligence, generative AI, right? Because artificial intelligence has been with us for a long time. So it's a little bit of that. We have to believe that it's going to work. And I think the other examples brought by the colleagues, we have to use this assumption. And if we think it's going to work out, it is going to work out. Doesn't mean that it's not going to be a lot of sweat and a lot of blood in the middle of the way. But the more that people believe in that dream, the more possible it becomes. Great. And it became a market reference, right, Valkyria? And it's called melhorias, like improvement, right? So everybody studied this case, and I survived. Yes, exactly. Congratulations. It's really a reference. So Mauricio, over to you. Thank you, Guerra. So this point that Valkyria talked about was very interesting. So when Trabuco took over Bradesco, he called me and he said the following. So you sold me this, and now you're going to come to this side to deliver it. Yeah, that was literally the conversation we had. And then Valkyria delivered it. So, guys, I started my career in the middle of the market reserve. So I'm talking about the end of the military regime. So the beginning of the 80s. And at the time, the banking automation was in this market reserve. And we came from multinationals. I remember the Oivete case, looking at Brazil and saying, okay, this is a very small market compared to what I sell around the world. So let me make an effort to manufacture this locally and develop this locally. It really doesn't make sense. But at this moment, the banks made a decision, and it was a turning point. It was a moment that really changed things. So the great banks, they said, okay, I'm going to manufacture it. I'm going to develop it. I'm going to manufacture the products. So without any natural order, but Banco do Brasil created Cobra, and then Itaú created Itautec, Bradesco, Digitec, and then Scopus. They bought Scopus. So these three great banks decided to make this investment, and they're represented here. And this brought a great industry, an industry that did not have this diversification anywhere else in the world. It made several companies viable, and it created the culture of development in the country. And all of us participated in this. So the question that I ask you is, what were the lessons learned? What did we learn from this? And what are the strong points that the financial sector developed during this time? Gloria, starting with you now. Okay, so I really liked the story that Alexandre told, that, being daring is what we need to do. And it's what Valkyria said. It wasn't a problem. Let's go and do it. And if it works, if it doesn't work out, we'll do it again. We won't sleep at night, and then it will work out. So it was really the spirit of the banks at the time, and that's what we did our whole lives. And I always say that, well, I left the financial sector. Today I'm in the Digital 30 Plus Association that is bringing the digital world to Brazil. But the financial sector, this thing about being daring and wanting to do it, that's still with me. I got that from the banking sector. And I believe that this movement ended up bringing to Brazil and to the banks independence and autonomy. So we became more independent, didn't depend on anyone, and the movement was very important, which is collaboration between the banks. So we could increasingly collaborate. It was a strong ecosystem, a robust one, and in this way we were able to develop things between us, right? So I'm talking about electronic checks. So this was developed inside FEBRABAN, the banks, and other things that were developed over time as well. So I think it brought autonomy, it brought independence, the capacity the banks had, because they were very strong economically speaking, to develop research and development in Brazil, for there to be the growth of new companies in Brazil and bringing things to Brazil, internalizing and bringing training and making sure that the people who are here could go to the banking market. So it is really a huge opportunity. The fact that we had some difficulties, because these challenges end up bringing possibilities for us to grow and develop. So there are things that didn't work out. Yes, there are. Computers, we're not going to make computers. We're going to make chips. No, the Chinese are doing it, so it's cheaper. But there are things that we can definitely bring to Brazil. And for example, new technologies, and these technologies that, like with AI and cybersecurity and quantum computing, this is the opportunity for the banks to bring this over. And in our association, FEBRABAN is one of our members, and it is ahead of these technologies, these new technologies. And we know that the banks know how to do this very well. They've always done this very well. So I think it was great for the Brazilian ecosystem, this thing about the reserve. It ended up being very good, but we have to open up, because there are lots of new things that we have to look for abroad and make it happen here. That's how we do it. Thank you.
O Unibanco não optou por
Unibanco didn't want to start a company such as Itaú Tech. We created partnerships, and the first partnership that was created, I think you don't know about that, but IBM was the first one to bring an automation platform here in the 1970s. And Unibanco was a pioneer to start an area with this IBM equipment. And then we had the market reserve, and then this first experience that we had. And then Unibanco decided to have partnerships with industries that were born here with automation, Rede, Procomp, and different companies with different experiments. It was not about developing hardware only. They had to learn about the banking system. And we were successful with this. So the lesson taken for this is that great partnerships with commitment will always lead to good results. Alexandre?
Eu vejo isso uma fortaleza até hoje.
I see this as a strength in the financial industry. This was a time when we went beyond banking. We had to be more than bank. We had to give solutions. There was hyperinflation. Brazil was growing, and we became sort of engineering companies because we had this culture of project engineering. We had to give solutions for everything, software, for cybersecurity as well, bank integration. This industry is very advanced, and I think it is thanks to that, thanks to the need to do something at that time. And nowadays, I see that the financial system still has this solution-driven initiative. PIX is a great success in Brazil. We were able to provide a solution to our customers in an integrated way, working with the regulator, the central bank, and it was a very successful initiative. And I'm sure that for the future, we'll be well prepared when we talk about Gen AI or other challenges ahead of us. We're prepared for that. Well, I don't have much to add to what they said, but I think that the legacy from that time is this innovative spirit in the financial industry. We had to make things happen. And I think that this is part of our industry since forever. We suffered a lot during market reserve because we already used a lot of technology, and this passion for innovating and using technologies from that time. I was very young back then, but I believe that it had to do with believing in technology as the power for transformation and always wanting to do something. This is priceless, actually. Well, this is a panel of stories, so let me share a very brief story with you all. There's something in the financial industry we prefer to do something than to buy it. And this allows us to create some talent in our industry. We want to develop our own things. And this may be a good decision or a bad decision, but we rather make something than buy it. And we don't find a business this big and this strong in other countries, and this has to do with that. And the second point is that Brazil, we receive foreigners. Foreigners come here. They want to install something here in our banking system. But here in Brazil, accrued interest taxes are 252. And foreigners, it's hard for them to believe how our system works. So Brazil is very Brazilian, let's say. It's very, and because of this, we are innovative because we cannot apply things that were created abroad here in Brazil. We need to create our own. This conference is this size now because of the investment of the banks, of the groups in doing things, in making things. You know, when you don't know something is impossible, you go there and just do it. So to wrap up, well, I have a challenge for you guys. In 30 seconds, I would like to hear your takeaway message for people who have to create solutions based on AI. But 30 seconds only, that's all you have. Valkyria, please go ahead. Well, it's hard, right? 30 seconds only. I wish you all good luck because you will work a lot. There's a lot of work ahead of you. Well, technology is here to support what is best about human beings. Empathy, values, if we don't look at that when we're creating technology, it doesn't make sense. These are primary things that we forget um, because we were so excited about technologies, but we need to restore that. And I don't know how you're looking at the, let's say, schedule or the way your company works nowadays, because you need to be looking at that. Gustavo?
Desse momento que a gente está vivendo, você dá uma recomendação.
If I were to give a recommendation regarding this moment when it comes to technologies, that are two people, yes, but, and why not? Now it's time for why not. You have to do things. Don't stop and keep wondering if it will work or not. Just do it. You need to be very quick and very open to do new things instead of being reactive. If you're not open, you will be, let's say, hit by the transformation. You need to be bold, fast, and to train your team. Evolution is technological, but evolution is human. Hélio? Well, along the same lines, AI is here. It will happen. So we need to understand the benefits for us and to do things. This is our new world. Alexandre?
É uma realidade.
Well, this is a reality already. We went through many changes, and this one seems to be bigger. So you need to study a lot about it. Always put the customer in the center of decisions and be ethical. Mauricio, thank you very much for being here with us. My dear colleagues, our panel was fantastic. Incredible stories of the time we lived together, we shared. Thank you.